up profiles that may include the automatic pushing of some key information to a personal pager or voice message when certain actions are being contemplated, or when your input is important. This is the current state of the art. In the case of public policy development, the entire political landscape could be reformed when the same technologies that are serving the FedExes or Land's Ends of the world are put into service for your community. New portal services will ask whether you want to be informed when a public hearing is scheduled, when a law is amended, or whether you want to participate in a public policy discussion. This Internet business solution is often referred to as customer care. And what it does for business, keeping customers informed and allowing instant updating of critical customer information, is coming to City Hall. Consider the implications of a network of community contributors with knowledge, not political patronage, as the baseline of support for public institutions. When a mayor or legislator remembers a community for how it contributed to problem solving and how those who participated could continue to be informed of progress through a report card. And problems could be resolved more quickly and responsibly. The real challenge is to make the commitment to placing more business solutions on the web and remain true to these well thought out goals. A little networked sailboat on the ocean has the power to change legislation in Brussels, but we have yet to see the potential of the human mind for quality decision making. When our collective attention is turned away from completing a step in the process and towards accessing ideas and concepts, then we will see the promises of better decision making a reality. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. That was very fascinating. Now, we know you couldn't be with us in the studio today. You're up in San Jose in the Silicon Valley to make a real important announcement for Cisco Systems Development. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Well, thank you. Yes, the idea that we just talked about, the way to harness, to remove, government has always been mostly focused on the process of moving paper, the process of saying this person has to sign off on this. It's almost like watching something being digested. It's not a very pleasant, or it seems like it's not really the purpose of government. The purpose of government is to really set new goals and to have a vision of how society and civilization will evolve and put itself to work on. But over the past few years, it's just been so tied up with the process, the step-by-step process, that most people have lost faith that there's a purpose for setting, for government setting those overall goals. The point that I'm making is that what I was saying in the talk is tied to what we're announcing internally today, which is a new e-government portal that actually demonstrates, it's actually a live set of tools that starts showing government leaders how the applications are not artificial, to actually start tying together a government institution so that people are focused on the quality of service to citizens rather than moving paper from one piece of, from one department to the next. So we've developed an e-government portal that really creates the seeds or plants the seeds of e-culture so that government leaders can understand a little more about how powerful it is when people start seeing the web tools and not chasing after those multiple, carbon copy forms, and that they're really focused on improving quality of service.
Very exciting. We'll look for more on that, I'm sure. Now we're going to return to our callers and continue with our second question and answer session. And I believe we have a caller from Mexico, from the Instituto Político Nacional Educación Continua in Mexico. Go ahead, please.
Hola, buenos días.
Considering that there are users, internet users, who also use fraud and damage systems and commit fraud, and hack the users of these services? Can they act so that altogether we can have some locks and some security measures, or do you think we're going to have some legislation in store to protect these users? Are all these things recommended? Would this be an ideal situation to have?
Mark, this is in your bailiwick. What do you have to say about security here?
Well, some governments have pursued having digital signatures as a way to authenticate and they have some means of following up on whether a report is actually filed by the person who says that they're filing it. So digital signatures have been seen as one way to start having a true way to identify who's making reports, who's interacting with a public agency. That, I think, is probably going to continue to grow, whether it's digital signatures or smart cards. It may be that people will have smart cards in the future that say, yes, every time I have a transmission with the government, I want to have it encrypted, and I want to also be informed if anyone has looked at that data. In other words, you really are asking for an audit of who's looking at the data that you have transmitted to the government. I think there's always going to be a fear that that people are going to corrupt the system, and I think that is as big an issue for companies around the world to make sure that there's nothing that's done that really sets us back, that we continue to look at the positive while we pay attention to the negative, and that we keep going after the higher goals and not be held back by the threat. But we can't take the threat lightly.
Please.
Well, I think there's a real-world example where the Internet today is playing a key role in election fraud, if you will, in that the University Autonomous of Baja California is making available websites throughout Baja California that give immediate results on elections and keep the public informed. And so that the information is power, and information does a great deal to keep things on top of the table.
Thanks, Walter. Our next caller is from Cuba, from Siena Internet in La Habana. Go ahead, please.
More than a question, we wanted to make a few comments with regard to the topic today, which is extremely interesting and has to do with the great differences between the technological divide and development of our third world countries and between our third world countries and the most developed countries. We wanted to make a comment rather than a question, and we would like to point out how we are resolving this problem in our country. In particular, our development is based mainly on a creation of a certain infrastructure, like the certain clubs which you may have heard of. Some of our students of different schools, primary and secondary schools, are learning computer sciences, and they're becoming users of Internet slowly. And the academic networks of the universities and, for instance, the certain public health and public education have also made available to the professionals and experts the use of Internet so that they can access the information on Internet, and that way anybody and anyone who wants to use that information can do so. That's what our country has been after, and we know that it is very difficult because we know that it is very almost an unreachable goal to have everybody have Internet at home. So this is the way we are solving the problem, and we think that is a way we can kind of catch up a little bit on the new technologies and the use of Internet here in our country. Thank you very much.
Well,
señora, ¿está usted allí todavía?
Well, thank you. each country, of course,
Sí, por favor.
has its own solutions to providing Internet access. And while for the majority of the people in the United States, Internet access will be on their PC or increasingly on third-generation cell phones, in many countries, these will obviously operate through schools, clubs, and community centers. Anything to add here, Walter or Mark?
Well, Mark, go ahead.
Go ahead,
Well,
Mark.
I'm just thinking about how what an opportunity it is when you've got people that are face to face in an internet club, where you can be critical or at least critique the information that you're looking at. You almost have an opportunity to set some guidelines or to set levels of standards for how sites are going to be trusted and turned to. We call the collection of communities of interest. And we're telling government leaders, I mean, lots of time governments say, well, there's no competition. You know, we have no competition. We're the only government in this country, and we'll always be that. But we also point to Internet communities of interest, where there's one called I'mAngry.com. And their purpose is to collect negative attitudes and then start lobbying the whatever government globally to change their policy. Well, you know, if government can be there as a trusted community of interest, it means there will be more dialogue between the government and the governed. And I think that as an internet club, you have the chance to establish standards for openness and for trustworthiness.
Okay, our next caller is from the Dominican Republic, Centro de Gestión de Investigación in Santo Domingo. Your question, please.
Sí, buenos días. Le habla el coronel licenciado René Antonio de León Suero del Instituto.
I am from the Institute for High Studies and Defense, National Defense Institute. Our question, we can't, the sound is very much cut. The majority of the third world countries of the Caribbean region and Latin America in general, Internet is reached by a very small sector. The great majority is very poor. 70% are poor and have no access because of the high cost of the computer equipment. Would you have some strategy, some specific strategy, so that we can prepare for the future, so that in the future we can have more people on the internet, and also if that is going to diminish what we call the levels of poverty, the threshold of poverty.
Gracias. Walter, go for it.
Well, this is one of the prime areas that we're working in today. What we see is satellite, first of all, knows no borders, no boundaries. When that is combined with the caching of information in an area, and I would say cyber cafes, you get a situation where you can make information available to the young people, to the citizens of the country at very low cost. Particularly if you make a copy of all the popular websites locally, then the cost to serve drops down to pennies. And with the cyber cafe concept or the internet club as in Cuba, it allows you to make available computers, internet connectivity, the ability to print documents, put things on disk. Anyway, this would be one strategy, and I'd like to make one other comment. Sure. That since this gentleman is from the defense area, one other thing that satellite does is give a direct connection between the user and the backbone of the internet, and people forget that the Internet is really a combination of networks, including government, education, and research, so that you can have with Internet or with the satellite a direct connection to the backbone of the Internet, whereas in most of Latin America, the only thing is available is the web. So a researcher has to swim his way up through this very congested web to get to North America, where he can cross over to the research networks that he's trying to reach. So this is a role that satellite can play to even the playing field.
Good. Well, now we have a caller from Peru. Go ahead, please. In Lima.
What are the tendencies to obtain more accessible, cheaper software in the developing countries? And what is the... ¿Podría repetir la última parte? I missed part of the question, the last part of the question.
Okay, what about access to software in developing countries? How do they go about getting the latest software that gives them access to the Internet and enables technology to happen?
Well, this is Mark Badger, and one of the things that we've been talking about is trying to get everything on the web, so that the functionalities that are built into web browsers and that are supplied by what we call application service providers, so that you can, not have to buy the application, you can check it out, or you can have it web enabled. As a matter of fact, we are part of our announcement today is that what we call a web phone that is really an IP telephone, and I'm talking to you on an IP telephone right now. But the idea of having the technologies all within a web browser makes it a lot easier and more available to get all these tools that we've been talking about.
All right. We next have a caller from Universidad Tecnológica de Tecamachalco in Tecamachalco, Puebla, Mexico. Go ahead, please.
Our question is the following. What kind of technical and professional careers are necessary to repair the whole infrastructure of technological information and networks in order to keep them up and running? And ¿podría hablar más despacio, por favor?
Well, the question is, what?
We're still interpreting the question.
Okay.
The second part of the question: what are the differences between the services offered by phone companies compared to the cable services that are offering Internet services? Thank you.
Okay, this is really a two-part question. We have one question about what careers and occupations are necessary to create and maintain the infrastructure for the Internet. And secondly, what about phone companies versus cable Internet access? And a couple of very interesting questions. Go ahead.
Well, first, as far as careers are concerned, it's my observation that the learning about how the Internet functions, which is taught within the schools of informatica, is key, and learning how to program routers to operate local area networks without congestion. Maybe Mark has more information on this side of things, but let me make one comment. The one thing that the education system in Latin America has to do, that they do not do today, is teach logical thinking. We find in maintaining networks the biggest problem is the young people, through culture, through their training in school, have not been presented with problems that they must analyze and go through in a logical manner. And if the schools do nothing else but teach logical thinking, it would help a great deal.
The second question related to whether you have equal ability to access the internet through telephone lines versus cable lines, and the answer is yes, although cable lines often provide, cable modems provide perhaps greater bandwidth and speedier access, although DSL lines, I understand, are very close. Mark, do you have anything to add to that?
Not really. I think you're
Okay.
right that as broadband, broader, more data bits being able to pass through the lines, as that gets more available, people will have different options, whether
Right.
it's DSL or cable or wireless.
All right. We have a question from Universidad Tecnológico in Mexico. Go ahead.
Adelante. What advantages and disadvantages do you have when you study? What's the difference between a distance learning and one where you're in the classroom? And do you have the same competitive advantage for somebody who has studied in a regular system as opposed to somebody who has taken distance courses via internet, for example? What's the difference?
Okay, distance versus traditional education.
Well, this is what we were trying to evaluate at the Classroom for the 21st Century. And what has to happen, it's really not distance learning. Distance learning to me means that you have an instructor at some remote location presenting a class that he would normally present in the classroom. What you need to do with the internet is have the learning occur by allowing the student to go out and find his own information on whatever subject you assign him and bring it back and write a report and make it available to the teacher for evaluation. So it's a different process completely than distance learning.
And I think in the short term we may find combining local sites with distant education as is often the case today. We have another question as we're getting close to the conclusion here from Toluca, Mexico. Go ahead, please.
Sí, bueno. Sí, gracias.
Adelante, México.
Ante este avance que se está teniendo con
Given the advances in the internet protocols, we in our state have a lot more schools using more and more internet, and they're incorporating internet in their classrooms. And so our problem is to motivate the teachers so that they can really bring into their classroom the internet. And what suggestions do you have?
Well,
Motivation of teachers.
This is a very important issue. How do you get teachers who may not be very knowledgeable about the internet to actually use the internet in their classrooms? A couple of strategies. One is to use other students that are already internet savvy and knowledgeable to teach other students, because sometimes the teachers will actually have less knowledge about information technology than the students. The other thing, of course, is continuing education for teachers. It's very important to teach old dogs new tricks, as we all have learned in recent years.
That's exactly correct, Peter. The teacher needs to become a facilitator. And we did experience in the Classroom 21 experiment the situation where one of the teachers was just terrified by computers and by the information age. So you just have to relax and be a facilitator. And the kids will do it on their own, actually.
Mark, anything to add to that?
No, I think those are good responses.
Okay, we have a fax from Cuba. It says he's a researcher in Cuba. How do you get access to high-speed research networks in North America? Walter, you want to try that one?
Well, you know, satellite is, I think, can play a very important part in this aspect of the internet, because satellite knows no geographic, no political boundaries. And it, as we mentioned earlier, the internet in Latin America and the rest of the world is really orientated towards the web. So as a researcher, if you can get a satellite connection from your research facility directly to the hub, such as the San Diego Supercomputer Center, where you have immediate access to just numerous research networks, then that's the way to do it. Getting research content through the web is very, very difficult no matter where you live.
Of course, it depends on the bandwidth of the system and the amount of data. For smaller data sets, current internet technology will work fine. For larger ones, you might have to use some of the alternative systems such as satellites that Walter is talking about.
It also, satellite allows collaboration. A direct connection from Havana to Caracas between researchers.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for your excellent questions, audience. We have run out of time. We hope that you've enjoyed participating once again in this exciting multilingual and multinational program. We invite you to participate in our 17th video conference of this year's series, which will air on July 5th this year, entitled Creating Achievable Visions with a Global Scope, Methods and Results. We are proud to announce that this is our 100th program. We look forward to participation in this very, very special event. For additional information on this year's video conference, please consult your participants manual, where you will find the dates and specific topics of each program. You may also visit our websites, intectra.com and onlinecompetence.com. On behalf of all of us who collaborate with the International Training Center, I thank you for your enthusiastic participation and interest in today's program. Thanks, and see you again soon.
building?
Yeah, the other building, yeah.